Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We're broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on TikTok. Folks, please tell us where you're coming from. Please send in your messages. Please send in your comments. And please give us a share. This is our 60th Good Evening Britain show, so we're very pleased to announce that on the same night as we're having this Coronation Special, by which is meant a full 1 hour dedicated to the coronation, which is coming up on Saturday. And we're going to be covering lots of elements of it, with a particular focus on its connection to, of course, Scotland. But before we get into that, I want to just thank everybody who has made this programme come so far. 60 consecutive programmes of Good Evening Britain. That especially includes the team behind the scenes, and they know who they are. It especially includes you, the viewer, as well, for watching, some of you watching very regularly, and we do appreciate that. So thank you very much to the team and to the viewers for this. And I also want to give a shout out to the viewer who sent me this t-shirt, which says, God Save the King. And you can get that one at Primark. A very nice t-shirt it is as well, nice and comfy, with the Union Jack through the words God Save the King. So thanks to the person who sent that to the office, much appreciated. Now, on this Coronation Special tonight, before I get into that, I want to also talk about what's happening this weekend. Now, the coronation will be at around lunchtime on Saturday, and it will be going into the early afternoon, but by 5 o'clock it will all be well over, and there's going to be a gathering in George Square here in Glasgow of all the pro-monarchy people who want to demonstrate public support. So if that's one of you, please do come into George Square for a celebration after the coronation from 5 p.m. onwards, until late, no doubt. But we here at A Force for Good have got one or two stunts that we're going to be doing. Okay, and especially we have got 14 posters which together spell out the 14 letters that say God Save the King, and we're going to be holding them up along with a selection of our Scottish and Monarchy flags, and that will look extremely good for the cameras. So please do come along if you can help us hold up these letters to create a great visual optic that Glasgow says God Save the King in George Square. That'll be around about 5 o'clock that we'll be heading over there, and we know there's lots of other people who are going over as well, so please do come along for that. Now, talking about the centre of Glasgow, our team was in the centre of Glasgow on Saturday just past with the first of our Coronation Street stalls, which we're going to be holding every month now throughout spring and summer. And we've got one or two pictures from our Coronation Street stalls. Let me just talk you through them. There is our table team. There was a fifth member taking the photograph, and that's the lads there, dressed up very nicely with their AFFG hoodies and their Scottish and British hoodies, and the link to those is at our shop, aforceforgood.uk/shop-1, and we're flying the AFFG flag, and also on the tall flagpole there we're flying a Union Jack with God Save the King Charles III emblazoned upon it, and we got a lot of good comments from that. Okay, people like to see the flag flying. There's the team in the heat of the action, talking to the great British public, and giving away as well a lot of our magazines. Union Heart, okay, the magazine that we'll give, we'll just take the photo down for the moment. The magazine that we're giving away was Union of Crowns, which is the magazine which celebrates the 420th anniversary of the Union of the Crowns, back 420 years ago in 1603, without which we would not be having a coronation on Saturday. So a lot of good information in this magazine. Let's check out the other pictures, and let's put up a link as well to our shop with this picture. There we go, aforceforgood.uk/shop-1, and I'll just, there we go, nice Scottish and British blue hoodies which you can get at our shop. Okay, and when we were departing, we noticed that the cheeky Scottish nationalist organisation called ALBA, or ALBA, had hired an electronic billboard with this seditious message. I'm not even going to read it out, but if you're watching, you'll see it. And so we told that electronic machine exactly what we thought of it by draping our Union Jack and our pro-British monarchy flag over it, and that makes quite a good picture. So we're doing that work out on the street, standing up for the British end. Okay, so if you'd like to join us, and we'll be back out again in May, do give us a message, send an email, and we'll fill you in with the proper details. Good stuff. Let's say hello to some people. Now, Debbie was first in, and she says, who's looking forward to Saturday? We're looking forward to Saturday, and I know a lot of other people are as well. Derek says, good evening, Alistair. Not long until King Charles' coronation. I shall be there. Derek is going down to London. Good for you, Derek. Oh, he says he's going to send us some photos as well. That would be excellent, Derek. Thank you. Fingers crossed the weather is great. And Derek has also got the bunting out. I know that because he sent me a picture of his house, which is extremely decorated in the bunting. Hello to Kat. And hello to Adam from the heart of the great British state of England, as Adam likes to call it. And hello to British Legends as well. Derek says, let's show the Nats we are proud to be British. Well, if you're in Glasgow in the centre and you can get in for 5 o'clock, we're going to be showing everybody that we're proud to be British and to support the monarchy. Hello to Alan. And Christopher says, good evening from the great British and loyalist town of Falkirk. Stuart is from Elgin and enjoying his prize from last week, which was the Union of Crowns mag, and the Union, the badge, the Coronation badge, and also a Union heart. And hello to Derek from Armadale, and to Mary from Inverclyde. And Adam wonders if Falkirk is a ScotNat stronghold. Well, not really. Hello to TC. Catherine likes the t-shirt. You can get it at Primark. God save the King. Christopher says, well, his part of Falkirk isn't and never will be. That's good to hear. Adam says there's calls to abolish Holyrood because of all the scandals that are flooding from within and drowning us. I know what you mean. Paul says hello from Germany and says, as an Englishman, we were Britons before the Romans split Britain up. That's a good point. And I'll be touching on that in a moment. Catherine's usually a great stalwart on the street stall. Wasn't able to be with us. Didn't need to be with us because we had a big team this weekend. Hope to see you later in the summer, Catherine. Chris is looking forward to the weekend and thanks us for the Union magazine and the nice card. Yep, we have the cards that we sent out these days are the James VI Proclamation King of Great Britain cards, which you can get at our shop. We sell them in packs of 5. That's if we're not sending them to you as a wee thank you message. Adam says, isn't it hypocritical? Here we go, sorry. Isn't it hypocritical of Useless and Michelle O'Neill to attend the coronation when they're both Republicans? Well, it's certainly interesting. It's an interesting thing. As far as Michelle O'Neill goes, she is getting a lot of flack from her supporters, so that's nice to see. And no doubt Useless, as you call him, will also be getting flack from some of his more hardcore supporters. But he is there to represent everybody in Scotland. That's the theory, of which, of course, the majority are for the monarchy. Christopher believes that we must push for the abolition of Holyrood. Tepis on TikTok says, everyone in Britain is British. Okay, right, well, what I want to talk about going forward, before I do that, great prize coming up at the bottom of the hour, by the way, great prize, check this out. That's a little Union Jack shaped box of truffles. Okay, we thought we'd push the boat out for prizes tonight, seeing it's the Coronation Special that we're doing, and you can get this at John Lewis, and it's not cheap, I can assure you. These, it says Charbonnel and Walker, milk sea salt caramel truffles, best before October 23. Milk chocolate with a salted caramel centre dusted in icing sugar. There you go. So we'll be asking a question at the bottom of the hour for these, and all you need to do is send the answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and the first person with the correct answer will get this. So if you've not entered before, give it a try, folks. Give it a try, because you are in with a chance of winning this. And that's all you have to do. So just set up a separate tab on your computer or wherever, or your iPad, and get ready to fire off your answer when I ask the question at the bottom of the hour. And we'll announce the winner at the top of the hour just before 8 p.m. when we finish. And we'll also send you this along with the latest issue of Union Heart, which is worth £3.50. So that's not an inconsiderable prize, I have to say. And it could be yours. It could be yours. So folks, if you haven't done it before, you got to try it. Okay, so let's begin talking about the coronation here. And there's one or two topics that I want to cover that I haven't seen brought out fully, and I'm going to do my best to try to bring those out. Things that you might not have heard before, like what is an anointed monarch, and why is Britain one of only, as far as I'm aware, 2 countries in the world to have one? What's the story about the Stone of Destiny? What are the particular elements of the coronation which reflect Scotland, or which symbolise Scotland in some way or other? And one or two other things, answering one or two of the usual sorts of objections that you kind of get, and just talking generally around this subject. And I'd be interested in your thoughts as well. So I want to start with something that's not controversial, but I never hear it said, and that's when you talk about the royal line. And it occurred to me once when I was reading this book, Britain's Kings and Queens it's a Pitkin guide, and it traces Britain's kings and queens back to Egbert, who died in 839. And I thought, well, that's quite interesting, because what it's doing is it's going back down through the Scottish line, and it's saying, for example, that Britain's kings descend down the English line. But that's, of course, just one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that Britain's kings descend down the Scottish line. So you could just as easily write this book and have it going back to, not to Egbert, but to okay. That's always irritating, isn't it? You could just as easily write this book and trace it going back to the Scottish kings. And so that's what we like to do as well, because we're British Unionists. We're looking at it from different angles altogether. So we don't hold to the view that the British monarchy goes back down the English line. We can just as easily hold to the fact that it goes down through the Scottish line. So it's that those things are not set in stone. These are just 2 different ways of looking at exactly the same thing. But it does make a difference politically in the real world how you articulate it. And I guess it's always tended to be articulated from the English perspective, and there's absolutely no harm in that. But that's simply just because there's more people in England, there's more scholars in England, there's more historical commentators in England. And so that's often the angle that you hear. But you could just as easily trace the British monarchy down through the Scottish line. And you see some Scottish nationalists on TikTok, for example, will say, oh, the king is English. Well, yeah, only if you traced it right back through the English line. You could just as easily trace the king back through the Scottish line, which is exactly what we do. So it's just a different matter of looking at exactly the same thing. So ultimately, though, he is the British king, the king of us all, and he can trace his heritage either going back down through the English line or going back down through the Scottish line. It just depends how you look at it. And of course, we here based in Scotland tend to look on it as going back down through the Scottish line. And we're going to bring this out because, you know, sometimes I think there's an awful lot of stuff that's never been brought out properly. Why is it left at a force for good to have to do this? On our minuscule budget, Anyway, happy to do that. We're happy to rise to the occasion to do that. So in our next magazine, which will be the Coronation Special, which will be coming out in the summer, we're going to have a middle page poster which will trace the crown back down through the Scottish line to McAlpin in 843. And so that will help to give visual image to what I'm trying to articulate here. Okay, that's the royal line matter dealt with. The second thing I want to talk about is the importance and the relevance of the actual ceremony itself, because there is nothing else that you'll find anywhere in the world that is going to be as elaborate from a religious perspective as a British coronation. And why is that? And what's all that even about? Well, an interesting thing is that ever since the concept of monarchy in the British Isles was established, and you're going way back actually to the 2nd century, to King Lucius of Britain. And as the gentleman said earlier, this was when we didn't really think of ourselves as split up in the way that we think of ourselves now. King Lucius of Britain, there's been some controversy around him, but this book believes that he was indeed a real figure. And it's a very scholarly piece of work. Anyway, this was back in the 200s, and he was the first Christian monarch. And ever since then, every king and queen, whether of England or of Scotland, has been at pains to ensure that they are understood as a Christian monarch. Okay, Britain has never had a monarch like Genghis Khan or something like that goes, oh, I'm the king, so you just do what I say. Why? Because, oh, I happen to be all-powerful. That's never ever been the tradition in Britain. It's always had a heavy religious element, and every king or queen has been, whether in Scotland or England, has been consecrated as a Christian. And the reason for that is that the king or queen is saying, I am not all-powerful. I am subject myself to the higher power of God. And you see, a lot of people deliberately misunderstand the phrase, the divine right of kings. They deliberately misunderstand it because they want to attack that religious element. And they try to pretend when they say the divine right of kings that they're saying that, oh, the king says his power comes from God and therefore he can do what he wants. No, that's not what the divine right of kings means. What it means is that the power of the king, such as it is, comes from the fact that he or she submits himself or herself to God, to a higher power. And only because of that submission does he have any claim to earthly authority. So a king or queen's claim to earthly authority in the British Isles and in Christendom has always been that they have submitted themselves to the higher power first. That's the theory. And it's a fine theory. It's a good theory. It definitely works. But some people don't really follow it. They don't understand it. So I'm trying to bring out this, trying to explain what that is actually about. And that's the anointing. The anointing as well, when they put the holy oil on you, is a sign of submission to the higher power. And there's only one other country in the world that does that at its coronation ceremony, and that is Tonga, would you believe? So Britain and Tonga are the two countries left in the world. As far as I'm aware, there may possibly be an African country that does it, but I would need to check up on that. But as far as I'm aware, it's only Britain and Tonga that still has this anointing ceremony and takes the view of the monarch as being submitted to the higher power. And that's something that really makes Britain, I think, special. Think about that. It's the only country in the world that is taking that religious point of view and elevating it as a core part of its national constitution. And you can maybe look about at our secular world and think that it's fairly benighted, but at the heart of the British Constitution is still that heavy religious element, which is quite remarkable when you think about it. And it really does make Britain different. It really does make Britain different. And that's why, as well, a lot of people don't like the monarchy. Like a lot of the kind of aggressive atheists, they don't like any of that. They don't want anything to do with that. So it really is a unique element of the British Constitution. The anointing of the Christian monarch, which is the core of the ceremony. Now, thirdly, let's come on to some of these Scottish elements in this coronation. But before I do that, I'm going to ask the question for the prize. Now, folks, if you have not entered before, send your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk, not org.uk, but .uk. Okay, somebody last week sent it to a different email address, and we didn't check it until the next day. So it's contact@aforceforgood.uk is the answer, and to this question, okay? This Saturday, pro-monarchists in Glasgow are going to be having a celebration after the coronation at 5 p.m. Okay? Monarchists, patriots in Glasgow are going to be having a celebration after the coronation at 5 p.m. in Glasgow. Where exactly in Glasgow? Can you name the place where they will be having the celebration? Okay, I mentioned it earlier in the program, and it's going to be a good day. But where exactly in Glasgow is the celebration after the coronation from 5 p.m? Send in your answers, please, to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and you could be in a chance with getting this. We will announce the winner just before close of play, around 5 to 8. Great stuff. Adam reminds us that Charles is the King of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, as well as the 14 Commonwealth realms and the 14 British overseas territories. That's correct. It's a fair swathe of the world, actually. Alan likes the info. Thank you, Alan. Harry says he's been out with his dad, sorting my back tyre of my back. Hope I haven't missed much. Well, you've missed a couple of points, but I think you came in earlier. But don't worry, everybody can watch it on catch up. Stuart says, I fancy a truffle. Well, enter the competition, Stuart. Go ahead. Doesn't matter if you've won prizes before, you can always enter again. Derek likes the show. And D. Stanners says he's attending the coronation. Well, that's good for you. Excellent. Okay, now let's look at some Scottish elements of the coronation. And this, obviously, from our perspective here as Scottish Unionists, we're always keen to see the country being mentioned or involved in some way. And of course, one of the major ways in which Scotland is at the heart of the coronation is, of course, one of the main artefacts of the coronation is indeed the Stone of Destiny, or the Stone of Scone, or Jacob's Pillow, if you like. Now, there's various narratives attached to this particular artefact, and that's it there in Westminster Abbey, guarded by a couple of the Queen's archers from Edinburgh, sitting in front of the coronation throne. And normally it would sit under there and it will sit under there when the king is being crowned. Now, that actually, the story of that is to take the romantic tale, which many people like to believe, is that this was the stone upon which Jacob laid his head in Genesis, and he used it, would you believe, as a pillow. And you wouldn't think he would get a very good night's sleep from that, but apparently he had a fantastic night's sleep, so much so that God was actually giving him a vision while he slept of a stairway, or rather a ladder to heaven. And it's been called Jacob's Pillow, okay? And the tale, the romantic tale, is that the prophet Jeremiah smuggled it out of the Holy Land and took it to Ireland, to Tara in Ireland, which was the site, we're told, that kings in Ireland were crowned. And there it stayed in Ireland for several hundred years. And the story has it that it was then taken to Iona, off an island off Scotland, where St. Columba had his ministry. And there's a belief among some that it was used in one of the first Christian crowning ceremonies in Europe, which was the coronation of the King of Dalriada, Aidan MacGabran, in 574. So that was maybe it was used earlier than that, but one record says that it may well have been used back in 574. However, there it stayed in Iona for about 300 years when Kenneth MacAlpine, who I mentioned earlier, took it to Dunkeld in Perthshire, and he was crowned upon it in 843. And then, of course, who should come along famously a few hundred years later? Edward I, and he decided he wanted it. Now, people can dispute why he wanted it. Some will say he wanted it because he thought it was the symbol of Scottish sovereignty, and so he wanted to take it to show what a bad guy he was and how he had dominated the Scots. That's one way of looking at it. Who knows? Or it may be that he understood the holy significance that had been vested in the stone through centuries, and perhaps he may have believed in that, and so he took it anyway. So it went from Ireland to Iona to Dunkeld down to London in 1296. And it's that particular bit of when he took it there in 1296 that a lot of Scottish nationalists are, to be frank, very hung up on. And they imagine that the stone's history ended there. But of course the stone was then used to help at the coronation ceremonies of English kings and queens right up until 1603, when the Scots king became King of Great Britain. And then after 1707, after the Union of Parliaments, it was used to crown every king or queen of the United Kingdom. And so what I'm saying here is that the stone's meaning has changed through time, and for the Scottish nationalists to not understand how it's shifted, how the meaning has shifted from you know, if you want to believe the story, from a biblical relic to an Irish symbol, to a Scottish symbol, to an English symbol, and then to a British symbol. You know, its meaning has grown. History and experience has vested a new meaning in the stone. Okay. So today the stone is invested with a wider British meaning that has come about from its very real history and the very real happenings and changes which have occurred in society and in these islands. And that wider meaning also has to be respected. Okay, the fact that this is now a British artifact, that this is now a British symbol, that the passage of time and history and events has now created more meaning in this symbol. And so its symbol now is something greater than what it was in 1296. It's something bigger. You know, that's another way of looking at this. And that's the way that we look at it. So if you talk about returning the stone to Scotland after the coronation, you're missing that bigger British picture. You're saying that basically history stopped in 1296, and this is always now that it always has been somehow a Scottish stone. Well, I'm sure when James VI sat on it, he didn't go, "Oh, this should be returned." No, he was quite happy because he understood that he himself was vesting new meaning in it as well, because he was now using it to crown himself as King of Great Britain. So, you know, there's a danger. If you just see the 1296 element of the Stone of Destiny, there's a danger that you're just simply missing the collective experience of all the British people that's happened in the intervening 700 years. So when we wrote our magazine here, Happy and Glorious, we touched upon this very briefly. And what we said was the removal of the Stone of Destiny from the coronation chair in 1996 desecrated a national monument, which is what the coronation chair is. It was built especially for the stone, so you desecrated the monument when you took the stone out. Now, the stone belongs with the chair, and if they're to be moved, and nothing against moving it, but if they're to be moved, move that monument together, you know. Have 5 years of the throne and stone in Scotland. Have 5 years of the throne and stone in Northern Ireland. Have 5 years of the stone and throne in Wales. You know, we're thinking about all of these things in that sense. We're not just falling for the usual Alex Salmond. Edward I came along and beat up the Scots in 1296, and we're still annoyed about it. No, you've got to move along. You've got to develop concepts as a consequence of the passage of time and experience. Anyway, Salmond was on a stupid thing yesterday. He said that if he had been First Minister still, he would have had the police stopping the stone moving out of Edinburgh Castle. Can you believe the divisiveness of that? But believe me, that's what these folk will get up to if they ever get their way. They will use these elements not for healing, not for bringing the country together, but for dividing the Scots against the English, just like it was 1296 again. Okay, so that's at least one good thing. The stone is being used to crown the British king. The Scottish stone, if you like, if you're still there, the Scottish stone is being used to crown the British king. That's a big result. another element, Scottish element of the coronation, the moderator of the Church of Scotland gets a role as well. It's the Archbishop of Canterbury who says most of the stuff. However, the moderator of the Church of Scotland is by his side, and it's the moderator who presents perhaps the most important artifact, or element rather, of the coronation ceremony, the actual Bible itself. It's the moderator of the Church of Scotland who presents the Bible to the king, and he says, here is wisdom, here is the royal law, the lively oracles of God. Other elements of the coronation which are Scottish, the clothing, the garb, has national symbols throughout them. Let's put up the Imperial robe. Now, this is the robe that the king is crowned in, and that's a robe that's decorated there with thistles, with shamrocks, and with pink roses. And we've got another view of the robe from behind. There you go. From the top, roses, thistles, shamrocks, roses, thistles, shamrocks. Very nice. And there's also fleur-de-lis woven throughout that as well, which are these three feathers, the Prince of Wales's three feathers, which is a French symbol, but it's also a Welsh symbol, and I believe it comes from the House of Tudor, which was a Welsh family. And one more picture of the robe. Perhaps not. Okay. Yeah, there's only two pictures there that we had. Now the another element is the coronation scarf, and this is what's put over the robe when the king is crowned, and that's got several national elements as well, not just from the home nations there. You can see the cross of St. George, the cross of St. Patrick, and the saltire there on both sides of that scarf. But there's also symbols there that date from the Empire times, I believe, and also some Commonwealth country symbols woven in there also. Now, also the bracelets, royal bracelets, as you can see, they've also got the Irish harp, the Welsh fleur-de-lis, the thistle, and the English rose, and that's two bracelets with those national icons on them. So that's a good British bracelet right there. Now let's have a wee look at the swords. Now that is we'll talk about the crown in a minute, but you see that sparkling diamond-clad scabbard with a sword that's called the jewelled state sword, and along the scabbard there are diamond-encrusted English roses, Scottish thistles, and Irish shamrocks. Let's have a closer look at that thistle there. You see that? There's the jewelled thistles on the jewelled state sword, which is presented to the king when he's crowned. And you can see some gems there on the right hand side representing, some green gems representing the Irish shamrock. Nice to see. Okay. and the sword belt that theoretically the swords are attached to. There you go. That's put round the king, and the buckle there again is engraved with English roses, Scottish thistles, and Irish shamrocks. It's quite a nice buckle, I have to say. Quite a nice belt, that, all round. Good stuff. Now, before I talk about the crown, okay, I was reading something on Twitter, and Twitter is, I mentioned this last week, it's so much rewards lies and rubbish and nonsense and aggression and nastiness. It really annoys me, because one tries to be moderate and put out nice stuff and get 2 retweets, and then somebody puts out something with swearing and nasty stuff and it's like 800 retweets. It's like, what? Anyway, some idiot put out a Twitter message which, needless to say, got hundreds and hundreds of retweets, saying that the St. Edward's crown was full of stolen gems. So I thought, well, I'll look into this, and guess what? Not a single stolen gem in the entire crown. Okay, what happened with the St. Edward's crown I'll tell you about in a minute, but the point was, this person just put out a lie, just put out a barefaced lie, and all these idiots who don't want to look into it for themselves all retweeted it like, this is what the king's wearing, all that, just lies, but they just accepted it without even doing their own research. And of course my attempt to correct it was seen by about 7 people. But that's frustrating. It is frustrating. Anyway, we do what we can, so this is an attempt by me here to correct it. Now, I wondered if they think it's Edward the First's crown. And this is an important point that I want to get to. Like, Edward the First, for anybody that's seen Braveheart, right? That's basically how he went down in history now. And so if you're a Scottish nationalist and you've seen Braveheart, you've seen Edward the First, you think he's the raper and pillager of Scotland. So when Scottish nationalists hear it's St. Edward's crown, they maybe think it's Edward the First. And maybe that's why they think it's all stolen and looted. I don't know. I'm just thinking that. I'm just trying to make excuses for their ignorance. But no, it's actually Edward the Confessor. Okay, Edward the Confessor. Now, Edward the Confessor was a chap, and let me just check the date here. Yeah, he died in 1066. Okay, when William the Conqueror came in. So, Edward the Confessor, who's obviously a very holy man, had these crown jewels, and then when Cromwell came along, right, the arrogant thug that he is, he destroyed all the crown jewels because he hated the monarchy. So what then happened, of course, was Britain was plunged into civil war throughout our islands, and thankfully Charles II came back in 1660 at the Restoration, and he got the crown jewels made again, and that St. Edward's crown is so called, even though it's not the original St. Edward's the Confessor. It's modelled after St. Edward the Confessor's crown, and so Charles II had that made, and that's the one they're still using today. And it's the gems were just simply acquired from jewellers, surprise, surprise, who no doubt got paid for them. And it was designed by Sir Richard Viner, who was the king's jeweller at the time. So perfectly legitimate. There's only one contested special gem in the royal collection, and that's the Koh-i-Noor diamond in the Queen Mother's crown. And that's contested. It's a matter of debate, but that's the only contested element of the British crown jewels is the Koh-i-Noor diamond. All the others are perfectly legitimate, perfectly normal, perfectly right. The Koh-i-Noor diamond will not be making an appearance, needless to say, at the coronation. So here's another thing, and I wonder if anybody else out there can help me on this, right? They call him Edward the First, right? The guy in 1296 who took the Stone of Destiny. But I was looking at this, right? And there's 3 Edwards before Edward the First in England. There was Edward the Elder, who came after Alfred the Great. There was Edward the Martyr, and there was Edward the Confessor. And then there was Edward the First. So why is he called Edward the First? I tried to find this out on using the Google machine, but I couldn't get any answers. Edward the First should have been Edward the Fourth. So why was that? Why has that naming, numbering continued since then? Surely the next Edward should add 3 onto his number to be true to English and the wider British history. So if anybody knows the answers to those things, please do tell me. I'd be very interested to know. Okay, let's have a look at Edward, St. Edward's, the Confessor's crown. There it is on the left. That's the one. Charles will actually be given 2 crowns. One, the main one is the St. Edward's one there on the left, and the one on the right, which he'll also be wearing as he leaves the ceremony, is the Imperial State Crown. And there's a picture of the late Queen wearing the Imperial State Crown on her coronation day. Okay. So there we go. That's some of the Scottish elements of history. I would actually like to see some Scottish gems, Welsh and Northern Irish precious metals added in to the crown there in order to emphasize the unity of the United Kingdom, because again, this is something that hasn't necessarily been thought about in the past, and I know, and I'm glad to see that they're thinking about it at this coronation ceremony. I noticed, I was quite pleased to see that there'll be 1 or 2 songs in Welsh and Scots and Irish Gaelic. So that's nice to see. So they're bringing in that sort of element, which is good. And what they need to do is they need to hire me as a consultant, and I'll tell them how to Britify. I'll tell them how to Britify the next coronation. But I'm looking forward to this one because I think we will see some new innovations that no doubt will help to strengthen the United Kingdom. And also, I was also glad to see that some of the fears that it would be too much of a kind of woke thing have not held true. It's going to maintain its the gist of it. It's not going to like bring in anything that would be absurd. Well, Adam says, yes, it's the atheists of that particular movement, so-called republic, will indeed find the oath offensive, no question about it. But they want to destroy the British soul. That's what they want to do. They want to destroy the British soul. And they just want to see like godlessness reign. I'm sounding a bit like Oliver Cromwell myself, actually. I have to watch my... Richard says he's never been on Twitter and never will. Well, I think your mental health will be better for it, Richard. As Chris says, modern social media apps are awful. Yeah, you've got to really look at. You've got to search for the good. When you find the good, it can be very good, but other times it's largely awful, and it plays it makes you it makes you stupid, actually, and it lowers your ability to pay attention for a long time. Some of these comments. Stuart says, will there ever be a Nicola Will there ever be a Nicola the Confessor? That is funny. We're going to screenshot that one. Will there ever be a Nicola the Confessor? Thanks, I'm glad you like the information, Christopher. Yeah, Christopher says, is it because the current system for naming kings dates from the Norman conquest? That's an interesting point of view, and indeed Edward the Confessor, the third Edward, he lost out at the Norman conquest, and I wondered about that, and I looked it up on Wikipedia, and it said actually that Edward I's father was a big fan of Edward the Confessor, and that's why he named his son Edward. Edward I's father being Henry III. So I thought, well, if he named his son Edward after Edward the Confessor, why didn't he call him Edward IV? So it's a mystery to me, but I think it's something to do, as you say, Christopher, with that conquest. Ian Inkster says, first Plantagenet. Possibly. Now, we have a winner for our little Union Jack truffle box, and I asked the question. I mentioned that this weekend on Saturday after the coronation there's going to be a celebration in Glasgow. Where exactly at 5 o'clock? And the answer is George Square. So folks, do get yourself to George Square. And the winner's Richard Padden. I just read out Richard's comment. Fantastic, Richard. This will be winging its way to you. Now, I don't know if we have your address, so please could you use the same email, and please could you send us your mailing address, and we'll get that in the post to you. Now, we're not gonna, you're not likely to get it. Well, you might get it by Friday. I'm just saying, thinking you might not get it in time for the coronation, but you might get it on Friday if we get it in the post tomorrow morning. But congratulations to Richard for that. Scuzz says, you're not answering me in the TikTok chat, so I'm trying here. Define woke and define your usage of absurd weapon. Well, Scuzz, that's probably why we're avoiding engaging with you in TikTok. That Preston journalist says, another great show. Thanks, Ash. Hope you're well these days. Richard says, keep up the good work, Ash. Harry says, well done, Richard. As does Alan. As does Debbie. As does Chris. As does Christopher. As does Stuart and Catherine. Richard's getting a lot of love here, as does D. Stanners. Great stuff. Okay, now folks, I just want to end the show by saying enjoy your coronation weekend. Have a great time. And if you're still around, at 5 o'clock, A Force for Good is going to be joining with others at the celebration after the coronation, which is just a big gathering in George Square. So please, folks, bring your flags, bring your food, bring whatever you want, and come down and let's just create a scene for the King in George Square, and help us as well hold our God Save the King placards, which is going to be a great photo opportunity. And who knows, you might even get into the front page of a Sunday newspaper. That's what we're aiming for anyway. So have a great coronation celebration. Hopefully see some of you in Glasgow at 5 o'clock. It just remains for me to say thanks for watching, folks. God bless the United Kingdom, and God save the King. See you next week.